it starts sort of a trend of this plot actually following the book quite closely, and so much so that I was actually pretty surprised at how faithful overall this felt for most of the runtime. Even as, like, yes, things are being modernized, characters are being brought in and fleshed out. We're seeing some more stuff that's not in there, but it was like he was adding, but he used the book as like the skeleton of the story, and he was very much stuck to that skeleton, that plot structure.
Welcome back, friends, to episode 364 of the Ink to Film podcast, where we read the book and then see the movie. I'm filmmaker James Bailey.
And I'm writer Luke Elliott.
And this week we discuss Edgar Wright's 2025 film, The Running Man. This is one that we've had on the list for a while. As soon as we heard rumblings, I think literally way back in 2017, when we first started this podcast, Edgar Wright, I was in my research, I was reminded of this, had like kind of a tweet storm where he was talking about how he wanted to recreate The Running Man. So literally since the beginning of this podcast, we've kind of been talking about doing this project then as of 2022 or something like that when he came
part of
aboard.
It because Stephen King's a favorite of the podcast, and Edgar Wright, I feel like, is one of your favorite directors. He's someone that I hold in high esteem as well. Definitely someone that I feel like you've praised quite a bit on this podcast.
Absolutely, yeah, and I continue to. I think, like, style-wise, just as like a filmmaker myself, like looking at somebody who has that distinctive of a style and up to this point has created really interesting films that you can in a moment know as him on such a small budget. And then this is kind of his first foray into $100 million budget zone.
I didn't know it had that kind
here.
of budget. That's wild. I mean, I guess it did look good, like in the sense that it looked like it was expensive. So I can see that, I guess.
Yeah. And there's a lot of stuff that we'll talk about with that. But if anything, this movie was surprising to me as an Edgar Wright film, as a Stephen King adaptation, as like different than expectations in some cases for me. And then just in general, what we get here is like, I don't know. It's like, will we see Edgar Wright return to someone else's IP again? Because this is the first time I think he's really doing that, other than that big Ant-Man debacle that went on where he was attached to it for such a long time and then eventually left.
Scott Pilgrim was. And that's was a
true.
classic.
Yeah,
you know?
That is true. Yeah. And we've already talked about Edgar Wright on the podcast. I can't believe I didn't think of that. So if you haven't, you can check out those episodes, and we'll talk about Edgar Wright some here, but those are the episodes to dig into if you want to hear all about his background and all the information we usually go into with the filmmaker.
Sure. Yeah. I want to sit back and hold a little bit of some of my opinions, but I am curious to know, as someone who is, you know, an avowed fan of Edgar Wright.
Yeah.
We love Stephen King. Two great things coming together. What did you think of this movie? Just generally, before we get into our spoiler thoughts.
Without spoilers, like, it's just generally a surprising movie. Like, I guess I didn't know The Running Man as well as some of Stephen King's other works, obviously. So coming into this, expectations...
You mean prior to having read it last week?
Having read it last week, yeah. So if you haven't already, check out that episode. We covered the book, which is a Richard Bachman-story that, you know, we talk about Richard Bachman in our previous coverage to like a month ago where we did The Long Walk.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of connective tissue here, but just thinking of this as a story that I thought I had a good idea of because of the Arnold Schwarzenegger film, and that's also something that's like at this point a distant memory of mine. So I'm coming in with that. We read the King story. It's different than I was expecting, which immediately like creates expectations for this Edgar Wright film. And going in, like I noted last week, what a kind of John McClane Die Hard story the running man felt like, just in terms of the main character's sort of attitude and like the chaotic nature of the story and like how like action forward it was, and how like it's just like a character just like to make the John McClane comparison, like stepping on glass with a submachine gun because his shoes are off in the Nakatomi Plaza building.
Classic movie moment.
Yeah, and so like it's that, but like through the entire film and like jumping out windows and all this stuff. So then going into Edgar Wright, I'm like, okay, Edgar Wright, if anything, is known for like his edits, his like precision action sequences, his like the way that he's able to like blend comedy with other genres, and like that very much comes through in this film. But expectations are a funny thing, because like I hold Edgar Wright in such high esteem that when I first started this movie, I was like, oh no, what is this? Like the first few scenes took some major adjusting to. And I did find by the end, just to lead the witness on, like at the end, I was like, I enjoyed this movie. I had a good time watching this movie. This is like a movie created by a director who has vision, and there's these big action sequences, and like he's having fun, and I had fun watching it. But it's nowhere close to my favorite Edgar Wright film. And like that surprised me, because I was like, it's Stephen King, it's Edgar Wright. Edgar Wright has talked about how like he's had this film in his mind since he read the story originally way back in when he was a kid.
Yeah.
So it's crazy to see a filmmaker with this like level of pedigree come in, and I'll just tell you too, in my research, it's mixed reaction critically, to audiences, to everyone, and myself, like coming out of it, I feel like I have a few points of where I'm going to defend it, but at the same time, like it was bizarre. It was a really strange movie, and it was by no means bad. And I wouldn't even call it middling. Like it was a good movie, but it was in no way what I was expecting. And it felt like it like almost like stretched Edgar Wright's style more thinly than I expected. Like it felt like it was, and I don't know if that has to do with big budgets, including like so many cooks in the kitchen per se. It felt like it had all the hallmarks, but it never had like the super sharp pointed direction that a lot of his other films have had up to this point. He's like almost no misses in my mind.
Interesting, man. I feel like I'm mostly on board with what you're saying, but I would go far enough to say I found this movie to be pretty middling. And for me, a middling Edgar Wright movie is a failure because I know what he's capable of, right? So that's where the expectations come in for me of like, this guy's great. And it seems like this should be a knock it out of the park situation. And yet what we got is just uneven. In a lot of ways, I thought some of the performances were very uneven. I think the world building doesn't quite hold up to what I was wanting from a dystopian futuristic story. I feel like that's like a whole genre in and of itself that this is a weird entry into. I went and saw it with a friend who had not read the book. My friend Steven. Yeah, I think he came away even more negative than I had. I think reading the book actually helped me a little bit because I could see like
Same.
what he was going for. But to someone who hasn't read it and is just watching it as this dystopian kind of like reality TV action movie, it's just kind of like it just didn't do a whole lot. There's certainly moments that stand out. There's certainly performances that stand out. Which we can touch on. I think Coleman Domingo is like a reason alone to see the movie. Way over the top, and engaging. I mean, he's super detestable in a lot of ways, but just a really excellent performance. I actually think Josh Brolin is really good in this movie.
In an interesting way, yeah.
Yeah, we'll get to our thoughts on all the performances. Yeah, I think the main one though is Glenn Powell, and I think he needed to sort of carry this movie. In order for it to really work, and his was one of the most uneven. There were moments where I felt like I can really see why he was cast, but then there were other moments where I just really felt like this isn't quite him. This isn't landing with me. This doesn't feel authentic to something about it. Doesn't feel authentic to me, I guess.
Okay.
It's acting's a tricky thing to talk about, but you just kind of know it when you see it, and you kind of know it when it's not working too. And there was just so many times where I felt like this just isn't working. And that kind of was where I was at with a lot of the like world building and some of that stuff too, where I'm like, it gets a little bit uncanny valley. I can see the artifice of it a little too much.
Right.
It's just like these things, if they were in a better movie, maybe you look past them, but because so many of the other elements are just kind of middle, it all just kind of adds up to just a kind of very average, this was a movie, it was fine experience. And when you're looking at a filmmaker like Edgar Wright, I just had a lot higher expectations for this. And, I have some thoughts of why this might have came out the way it did. I'll maybe put forward more into spoilers because we might need to talk about actual plot. But, overall, just kind of, I'm kind of disappointed, which is a bummer because, like you said, we've been really excited about this one for a long time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I went on a journey with this movie, and like a lot of what we're maybe reacting to is like a taste thing with this film, where he decided to go in and make a campy action, like in the vein of like an 80s Schwarzenegger film, which is this is obviously like a follow-up to in a sense.
Yeah.
While trying to be closer to the source and playing in this really weird space, almost an uncanny space, which I would think is like pretty intentional. And whether that worked or not is kind of up to us to as the audience to decide. And I do think time will be kind to this film in a sense. I agree with your assessment of like Glenn Powell, for example. Like at the beginning, that was a major, really the first scene. And like clicking into like
he has his
daughter
or toddler daughter in his arms, and he's like arguing for more pay or something. Yeah,
right. And just like the dialogue didn't feel like Edgar Wright. The scene breakdown, it felt cheesy. Like it felt, and I'm sitting and thinking like this is Edgar Wright,
or
like,
just not real. Like I didn't buy it. That's the thing. Like if you're gonna sell me on a dystopia, there's just like you got to do some work to sell me on the reality of this world. I'm thinking about even like the show Silo that we covered, which is, it's a very different world than ours. They're living in a fucking silo underground.
I think tonally different from what he's going for here, though.
Very, but my point is still that I felt like the show believed that this is the world we're in, and like I didn't see the artifice so clearly. I mean, there were times maybe in that show. Maybe it's not the greatest example, but like, if you're going to do any sort of dystopian futuristic thing, like you got to do a better job at making this feel like a believable setting and get us sort of bought in. And I just felt like I never really got there with this, and or with the characters.
Yes, I think like this is what I would boil my sort of thoughts on it down to after I've really sat with it for a little while. While I think the narrative and the characters were the things that were like kind of holding me back, there was so much in it that I liked, and so much about, like I was saying before, like this idea of like this is a dystopian world where entertainment, I think, and he really keyed in even more so than Stephen King did on like the entertainment aspect, and how this is like it's a dystopia that's built around this like entertainment industrial machine, right?
Yeah. And
like this is all baked into commentaries, obviously, that he's drawing on for modern day, and like the way that so many things are vying for our attention. And like I think that there's a deliberate action here of, and we touched on this last week, about saying like we need to be careful about our things commenting and having fun in a dystopian like hellscape. Having a movie that's also fun is like almost entering into the arena of being like, is this the thing that it's warning you about?
Serving as the very thing that it's supposedly making fun of or being satirical of or whatever, lambasting.
With how clever I think Edgar Wright is, and with how like the type of filmmaker that I've seen him be at this point, is so funny, and there's so much satire there, that I feel like he's both creating a film that people in the world would be engaged in watching, and also stepping out of that in a meta way, or not, maybe in just like the real world sense. He's making a big action film that has like a high wire act of difficulty in terms of like the choreography, the way that he like is so meticulous about his camera work, and how everything has to line up perfectly for his edits, and it's like all been planned ahead of time. Like I can feel that creative involved. But like I said, it's like he's got one hand on the wheel rather than when it's his own IP and he's been working through it, like both hands on the wheel. And to me, like it is, I did walk out a bit disappointed, but I like find myself realizing that it's got a lot of like style to it. And we talked about like style and substance last week in terms of like what you're consuming. And I think that this film is trying to play it both ways, but really veers into like there's a lot of style here. And I don't know if the narrative itself, like from the get-go, has enough substance to make both commentaries.
I have a lot of thoughts on that, but let's just go ahead and jump into any behind-the-scenes stuff you have. That way we can get into our spoiler talk.
Well, I talked about how large of a budget this is for Edgar Wright, and I talked about some of like the background of how he kind of started. He got the ball rolling, and eventually I think it was Paramount decided to create a film, and then Edgar Wright was the first that was attached. He created a script with Michael Bacall, who he also co-wrote Scott Pilgrim vs. the World with. So I think that's pretty cool. Like that we're getting the same team back over again.
It just raises those expectations, man.
What I will say, Scott Pilgrim vs. the World, very divisive film when it came out, and honestly, like I remember people not liking that movie.
Yeah.
And I think it's like in years, I think it's built up a better following, and the cast is incredible, obviously. And there's so much. I don't know that this film will have that sort of resurgence in the future, but I do think I don't want to create too many excuses for a filmmaker like Edgar Wright, because like he can take it, like he can afford to have this not necessarily be his most lauded film, but at the same time, like I do really know for a fact that like when you get more money involved, you get more people who are involved and opinionated, and I think things can change. And the best filmmakers can navigate that and still somehow come out on the other end with something. But this from the start, like I remember being excited for Ringman, and then it was like Glenn Powell is the main character, and I was like, what a choice. What a choice. And he's having a moment, obviously, right now. But you're talking about his performance being uneven. Like, I've only ever seen him in sort of romantic roles or, like, leading man, like, kind of hot guy vibe. And, like, it was cool to see him kind of branch out here and have, like, chaotic, like,
Did you
insane
see the new
energy.
Twisters movie?
I did, yeah.
Yeah, I thought he was okay in that. He's not a main character, but he's kind of a side character. But he kind of fit this, like, I don't know, over the top. He's like a streamer or something in that. He's like an influencer. And I don't know, I felt like he really kind of fit that role. It was like one of the better things about that movie is how well he fit that role. When I was thinking of that role, I was kind of thinking like, oh, maybe I could see this. And when you were talking about, does this movie go on to get kind of a cult following or like improve over time? One of the ways in which I think it could is if we see Glenn Powell continue down this road and have some like standout performances that start to sell us on this version of him. Mm-hmm. We might look back at this as like a piece along the way that makes more sense. Whereas right now it's kind of a weird outlier for him, and I don't think it didn't feel like it fit to me. But like maybe in the in the fullness of time and as a piece of his career it'll make more sense. But this was like I don't know. I kind of wish we had like a Bruce Willis in his prime. You know, you talk about that John McClane kind of stuff, like someone who like you just kind of bought as this like gritty, angry, you know, fuck you, anti-authority guy. And yet, like, one of the things that was, like, great about Bruce Willis in those kind of movies is, like, you always liked him. Like, he was still inherently likable, and you, like, wanted to root for him. There's just something really compelling about the way he played those characters. And I just, like, if that had been the case here, I think this movie would have gone farther. But I don't know. I never really bought that from him here.
It's difficult. Like, I don't think he nailed the role.
And it's hard to point to what he did wrong. It really is.
I like to see actors take chances, and I like to see people step out of their comfort zones. And maybe, like you said, as time goes on, like he continues to develop, and this is a step in the right direction, and that all of that. But yeah, it's like I did read that like he reached it for what it's worth. He reached out to Arnold Schwarzenegger and got his full blessing to play the character. Mm-hmm. And like
we're gonna rewatch that old movie, by the way. I think that's gonna be our next Patreon episode. It was something we've both seen, but it's been a long, long time. Don't take away from this that we think that the older Running Man is definitely better. Like, I need to rewatch that to even know how I feel about that movie, because I only have vague memories as a kid. It's not like I remember it being some spectacular movie.
I mean, it's cool to see, obviously, like, Stephen King was excited about this, and, like, there's some changes that are made, and Stephen King got a look at the script, and Edgar Wright talked about some of that.
I want to put forward a little teaser for the end of this episode as well. I would also like for us to decide how we feel about this in the context of The Long Walk and The Long Walk adaptation. Maybe we can do some comparisons to all of that. Since we're doing kind of back-to-back Bachman projects here, why not kind of take them all as a whole?
Sure. And we also talked a lot about The Long Walk last week with the book. So it's good to check in on that. Makes sense. Edgar Wright went to try to get Stephen King's blessing, right? So they wrote this script and they showed it to him, and there were changes. And Edgar Wright talked about how he was so nervous, like he felt like he had written the script for an audience of one, where it was like if Stephen King signs off on it, then I feel okay about it. And he did. Stephen King signed off on it, and I'll get some more into because there's significant changes.
I know he's weighed in on the changes to the ending and stuff. Yeah, because there are changes to the ending.
Just looking at the cast list and having seen the film, I do think Edgar Wright maintains a great eye for talent. Like, everyone in the film, whether they're a big star or not, I just saw Task, which is a show on HBO with Mark Ruffalo, and Amelia Jones, who actually played Amelia Williams in this film, who's the person who's kidnapped. She was excellent in that show, and then it's cool to see her here, and her star is just rising. He's so good at grabbing onto stars that are rising, and then I think that may be something here that we look back on, and maybe this is the Glenn Powell. This is the sign of Edgar Wright's mark of approval on Glenn Powell, and maybe he's going to go on to do all this stuff, and because he does have a great eye for talent, and he always has. And
I'm not ready to write off Glenn Powell. I know some people really don't like him. I don't know anything about him, like, personally or anything, so, this is not based off of any of that. I would just say, like, there's been actors in the past, I think DiCaprio comes to mind, where I thought early on in their career, I was like, this guy is, I kind of, like, typecast him as a certain kind of actor, and then went on to become one of the greats, right? So I don't want to write anybody off. Maybe Glenn Powell will get there. We'll see.
That's like a heartthrob thing, right? Often when they play a heartthrob role early on, like I remember...
It's like, this is a rom-com guy. Matthew McConaughey famously was being cast in rom-coms. Like,
and he had to go through like
again.
sort of a renaissance of his career, I would say, because he really was in that role. And then more recently, I think like the world really had a shift on Timothée Chalamet. Like Timothée Chalamet seemed like he was like kind of in that weird like no man's land where he was like going into these roles and people were skeptical, and then he just kept like hitting and he's definitely of his generation.
He's still a weird Wonka. I'm gonna continue to say that, but he's a great Paul Atreides. I think he's excellent.
You don't have to nail every role. It's just like when you see them in roles, you're excited to see the movie. Like that's a
he's another good example for sure.
We talk about Edgar Wright with music often, and Stephen Price composed the musical score for this film, who's previously worked with him on The World's End, Baby Driver, and Last Night in Soho. So it's cool to see him reteaming with them.
No, I still haven't seen Baby Driver, and I still haven't seen Last Night in Soho. So I haven't seen a few of Edgar Wright's more recent films. I've seen like all the Cornetto movies, and I've seen Scott Pilgrim, obviously. I feel like there's like one other in there I've seen, but like I've definitely I haven't like watched everything he's done like you have. So I have blind spots.
It's funny because like Baby Driver, the cast there was like definitely sort of like primed, and then like stuff came out about Ansel Elgort, and like I think his star has fallen, and then obviously like the big elephant in the room with that film that like I haven't watched it since all the controversy came
Spacey?
out.
Is it Kevin
yeah,
Spacey?
Kevin Spacey's like it's like you can't even really watch it anymore.
That sucks because he's in a lot of good movies from back in the day too that are definitely tarnished.
I really liked pointing to Baby Driver as like a film that like that sort of like editing to music style and the way that he was able to bring all that together was really fun and kinetic, and I think he has a fair amount of that here. But like I said, I would just consider The Running Man sort of like him dulled a little bit, and like that's sad to see. And I'm hoping that going forward, I know going forward he's gonna return to form and like I create films that like wow almost all moviegoers, whereas this one I think is really dividing people. It's dividing us, I think, a little bit, and it's divided myself. I'm divided from myself in some ways with this film. So as I said, the movie was like $100 million reportedly, somewhere in that ballpark, and as far as I've seen so far, it's grossed worldwide like 50 million. So it's like it's shaping up as of right now to be a film that's not making back its money. I don't know that like even Scott Pilgrim made back its money in the theater. I don't know like what that film cost. I don't remember. I'm sure we talked about it in that coverage, but you want to see a filmmaker like this is the kind of filmmaker that like when you see the choreography, the attention to detail, when you see the long takes and like all that stuff, anything that's like stunt related usually is like actually being done. Like those are the kind of filmmakers that like I support their films, and like I like to see them take risks, and I think this is Edgar taking a risk in a sense, and it's like he creates films that are worth going to the movie theater to see, and I think that like that this film definitely holds water in that regard. As far as like, unfortunately, I don't know that the narrative and the character work got there all the way for me, but like the spectacle of it did, and like while we're talking about that idea of like if we're talking about the world of The Running Man, I wouldn't consider this to be mindless spectacle, especially because like
I think it had a very deliberate message behind it. If anything, I think it was a bit heavy-handed, and like I know we're in a day where like subtlety is often missed by people, so I think there's maybe a little more pressure to be a little more heavy-handed with your messaging. And the story itself, like we talked about last week, is pretty heavy-handed with its social messaging. But if anything, it got even more broad here, really hitting you over the head with some of this stuff.
And how often do we talk about like a subtle story that gets adapted to become more broadly appealing, changes, and fundamentally becomes a little easier? Like I feel like there's maybe some of that happening here.
There's some of that, yeah, a little bit.
But at the same time, like I think it's at least, I don't know, it's a strange thing to say because I want to talk about the subject matter now in general without spoiling it. But in general, this is like I would consider this to be like a anti-authoritarian story in general. We started out with that in the King story, and I think that holds true here.
And also, it's about class warfare too, right? It's very much like the poverty, people in poverty rising up against the ruling class.
And whether I don't know, like I don't want to turn my nose up at a film for having anti-authoritarian messaging, even if it's not subtle, because it may be reaching those that are on the farthest like edges, and they maybe don't want that subtlety or can't process that subtlety. It doesn't mean that the movie becomes for me, but at the same time I'm like, I can see a reason for a film to be more broad when it has a message like this versus like something to be more broad to make more money. And I don't think it was like, I mean maybe it was a money choice, but I think here it was like, let's try to get like the tendrils out as far as we can and reach a broad audience because of messaging, because this is like what we want to avoid. This is a cautionary tale, and it is up to, you turn the knob all the way up to like 11 up to 100. Like it's definitely that. It's not subtle in any way. It's bonking you over the head with it. And it's like, to me, to my own sensibilities, that wasn't very enjoyable. Like I didn't like that amount.
And to me, that's the thing, is the failure state of that is if it becomes so obvious that it draws attention to itself and it feels a bit preachy or a bit like you start to see the artifice. And that's where this movie like really got points knocked off for me, is when I'm taken out of the experience of, I'm in a theater. Like I went to a theater, it was a good setting and an environment to like devote myself to this film. And yet there were things within it that were knocking me out and making me very aware that I was watching a movie, and that this probably had a message behind it that was trying to be done. And like I'm totally fine. Like I love movies with political messages, but like it needs to work. And like I felt like this one at times didn't. I don't know. Like I'm behind it. It's like I'm behind the message, but it was a little obvious. Like I don't know.
Yeah, and it's like, if we're trying to Trojan horse this in for people, we need a little more subtlety.
It's got to be inside of. It's got to be inside of a Trojan horse.
Right. So we've seen this story before, I think, and we've seen it like more subtle than this, and like as subtle as this. But this goes to the line of, as far as like, it is really just like spoon feeding an audience a message in a sense. But there was the part of me when I walked out that was like, if this gets one person to realize or to open their eyes in some way, and like I think there's something to that. I don't love it personally as an Edgar Wright fan, or as somebody who like obviously sees a lot of films and engages with this kind of stuff. But Stephen King said something that I think is very telling of part of what was going on here, and he apparently famously disliked the original film with Arnold Schwarzenegger.
I had heard that, yeah.
So, and I think
it's quite different from what I do.
Not to mention a younger King, I think he was a little more fiery. Like he wanted to fight about his work a little more. And nowadays I see him sign off on some questionable adaptations that he's like, that's great. I'm like, hey, to each their own. But he praised this film, and he called it a bipartisan thrill ride. And that to me was like a sort of canary in the coal mine a little bit, where I was like, okay, is that the attempt here? Is the attempt here to broaden the scope to make it palatable? Or is this broadening the scope to hopefully pull in maybe some who would be considered more moderate or something like that? So that's when Stephen King called it a bipartisan thrill ride. I was like, that's
interesting. I guess in the sense that there is like, the conspiracies and thinking that like the media is owned by the left. And it's like, maybe if you're equating that with what's going on here and the control by the media, but like, I don't know. I don't really see the connection. I think it's pretty obvious.
I think it's that like it's not going to be. It didn't go so far as to be offensive to either group, which to me sometimes means you're playing it safe. It means you're playing it safe, and that usually means like for broadening reasons or financial reasons or whatever that looks like. They want people to go, like a bipartisan thrill ride would be like Top Gun Maverick would be a bipartisan thrill ride, and even that one I would say is like got plenty of military industrial complex built into it.
Well, but that one I would agree more does feel like truly more of a bipartisan thing almost.
Yeah.
Whereas, I don't know.
Maybe it's like the ridiculous, like almost like surreal nature of a film pushing it to this line of believability is saying like, well, there's a party that's looking to turn their nose up at woke stuff, might not see this as woke, and in that way it could still connect. It could still be an entertaining film in today's theater going experience. And again, I don't personally like that. But these are things that I'm sort of mulling over what was going on in the process of this film being made.
The only thing I can think of, because like, I don't know, the woke stuff, like they're going to call it woke regardless. There are black characters in it. They're going to call it woke. But the only thing I can see is that like on both sides of the political spectrum, I do think there is an attitude of like wealthy elites keeping us down a little bit. And like, that's one of the things that the right, you know, for worse, I was gonna say for better or worse, but I think it's worse, was able to capitalize on, right? A lot of that sort of right-wing populism. You could say that this could appeal to that. It's just, to me, it's also hollow because, you know, their guy is a billionaire himself who's used this presidency to enrich himself and to betray everybody who elected him. So I think it's all obviously not right-wing, but like, I guess it depends on your perspective, and maybe you don't see it that way. I don't know. It's hard to put myself in those shoes, but
I would have considered like, and I don't know how this will land with everyone, but Glenn Powell seemed to me a choice that was definitely in that bipartisan camp.
Yeah, I think he is like famously like you know, doesn't like to be involved in politics and you know, neutral and like a lot of that kind of stuff.
And a lot of the roles that I've seen him in would appeal to the right.
Yeah.
And so like there's like that as well. Like maybe, you know, we're seeing an unhinged, I would say, anti-authoritarian character here from somebody who you typically would see in a role that would be more conservative. But again, that's kind of unfair to do to an actor to an extent too. Like I don't know, unless they're outspoken and they start saying stuff. Like I hesitate to think that like he is who he's playing on screen in some cases, and like I don't know, it gets a little weird. But sometimes that is the case. Sometimes people, you know, they pick their roles based on their agendas and stuff. So anyway, so moving forward, we're going to talk about the plot some here. I did want to note just this idea of like energy. Like I do think this film has energy to it. I think it's got like that kinetic feeling. I think like, especially once the game begins, I think the location to location beat and sort of the chase of this film kept me engaged throughout. And like the set pieces specifically that I mentioned early on, like Edgar Wright is just good at thinking of like, what's a scenario that's going to look cinematic, that's going to be engaging to see on film, and how am I going to do it differently than other people may have done it before? And there's like car chases that I think he's particularly good at. I think action sequences and like the choreography of like actually seeing the blows land instead of quick cutting throughout. And we get like, there's like a zero gravity sequence at one point that I'm thinking of that like we've seen before on film. But I think the way that like the beat by beat sort of progression of how things play out, it feels very Edgar Wright. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. I just want to like come back around to that sort of energy. And then like, I do think hearing this film was $100 million was a little surprising to me, but as I think about it, I do think like you can see it on screen. Like there is a lot of like, I think practical work being done. There's a lot of like cool, like kind of, I don't know, underworld of this dystopian society that we get to see. And like, there's a fair amount of that did work for me.
I think the Hunters with McCone was a pretty cool version of that. There was a reveal, which we won't spoil here, that happens that was pretty cool. I thought some of the like production of the TV show and like the way that people would be watching it and he'd be catching himself on TV and stuff throughout. Like I thought that was all pretty cool. I like the way that worked overall. And that was definitely something I felt like you had to nail for this movie to work. He
was able to like effectively do like, I mean, I don't think this is a spoiler to say, but like there's like sort of a Kardashian thing going on.
Oh yeah.
And like there's like a humor to that. And I think like the humor does come through a fair amount here. He puts the character in ridiculous scenarios that are kind of funny, a la Die Hard kind of feeling things.
Yeah.
Where it's like funny how it's happening, and the fact that the character is surviving it is ridiculous, and you're like, I can't believe this is happening right now. Mm-hmm. So that like those are like some of the fun areas that are going on. And then the movie, as the original source does, it shifts into like a different gear, like leading up to the end. And like it'll be interesting to track, because I think last week we talked about whether it made good on some of what it intended to do or not.
I'm ready to get into spoilers, man. I think it's about time. So if you have not seen the movie and you care about spoilers, I guess check out now. Come back later if you do watch it. Overall, I think it is like, if you're an Edgar Wright fan, I think you're gonna want to have seen this to like kind of keep up with his career, know where it's at. I would just say, like, yeah, don't expect it to be the best Edgar Wright film. It's definitely not that. It is definitely divisive. You know, maybe you'll end up liking it more than others. It's kind of worth giving it a try, I think.
Yeah. And I will say that's something I meant to mention earlier because you did mention it. The people that I went with also were very mixed on it, to one of them saying they didn't like it. And that's like, it's just really interesting to get all those different perspectives. And neither of them had read the original material.
Yeah.
So there's that as well. It'd be a difficult one. While I want to recommend it to be, it'd be a difficult one for me to like unabashedly recommend.
Yeah, that's it's like see it to experience it and to like form your own opinion, but not necessarily because it's like the best thing and like you need to, people. I'm not pounding the table saying like people are wrong about this. That's not what's going on here.
Okay, so the plot here. In the near future, the United States is ruled by an authoritarian media network. Most viewers live in poverty with little access to healthcare, and the network placates the masses with trashy, violent game shows and reality television. The most popular program is The Running Man, where runners can win $1 billion if they survive 30 days, while the network's 5 hunters, led by the mysterious Evan McConey, and ordinary citizens try to find and kill them. Given $1,000 and a 12-hour head start, runners are required to film themselves every day or else forfeit their earnings, but still be hunted. Ben Richards, a blue-collar worker in the slums of Co-op City, is unable to afford flu medicine for his infant daughter, Kathy, after being blacklisted for union activism. Over his wife Sheila's objections, Ben tries out for the network and is selected for The Running Man, agreeing to participate when executive producer Dan Killian offers him an advance for Kathy's medication and a safe house for his family. As the hunt begins, Ben travels to New York City in disguise, but flees after the hunters kill runner Tim Jansky.
Okay, so opening to this movie, this has a lot of that early world building stuff that I felt like didn't quite land. You talked about that first opening scene. I'll extend it out to like his home life because like I wanted stuff to be a little grungier, a little more like obviously they can't make ends meet, like showing them really struggling. Yes, he has the sick kid, but like nothing about that. I mean, I don't know. I guess I would need to see it again, but I was like, I don't remember that looking like a particularly squalid sort of living environment. I don't know. There's just certain things that didn't quite land here. And then he goes and he tries out, fairly similar to the book. And it starts sort of a trend of this plot actually following the book quite closely, and so much so that I was actually pretty surprised at how faithful overall this felt for most of the runtime. Even as like, yes, things are being modernized, characters are being brought in and fleshed out. We're seeing some more stuff that's not in there, but it was like he was adding, but he used the book as like the skeleton of the story, and he was very much stuck to that skeleton, that plot structure. And I kind of think this might have been one of the missteps. We've seen this happen so many different ways, and sometimes super faithful can be excellent. Other times it can get you in trouble. I think it got him in trouble a little bit here. I think this is Edgar Wright. You know, he's talked about how he wrote the screenplay with an audience of one, and it sounds like he's a big fan of Stephen King. And I'm wondering if there's a little bit of that going on here, where he was more focused on pleasing King than maybe think about what was truly best for the story and make it work as a standalone version. Because I think at times I was expecting it to go into different places and to do different things and to try out some different stuff, and it would kind of be like, oh no, this is just following the plot of the book, which for me, we talked about it last week, and I guess kind of spoilers for our episode, I think it's kind of a middle of the road Stephen King book. Like, I don't think it's his worst, but like this is not ranking anywhere near one of my top King books. So I'm like, if there's even any of the ones you're going to adapt that deserves to maybe be reimagined, I think this was one of the ones, and I was a little surprised by how faithful things continued to be here.
Yeah, it was very faithful. And like you said, I think obviously Edgar Wright is he's a filmmaker who's used to doing what he wants to do in a film. And oftentimes I think the audience goes with him, and he has great taste for that. And it's interesting to see him going with what he wants to do, which is be very similar to the original material, because I think he saw The Running Man having read the original story, and he was like, oh, what a shame. Yeah. There's so much going on here in this King book that I'd like to see on film. And then he was like, let me stick really close to this. Now, I will say, like, there is early on, he's already, and I'll start building the case for this. He's already showing this character to be very different and much less like I would say like the King story is like almost nihilistic.
Yeah.
Like in its messaging. And I think this film early on starts to show this character as, I would say, immediately more likable in terms of a lot of the ways that he's interacting with this world. And then also just seemingly is a hero in some cases and is pushing for activism, like union activism. And he's saving people in disaster moments and that sort of thing. And he's trying to do the right
Much
thing.
more heroic.
Yeah.
And that's true. I do think maybe you could say pessimistic at the very least. But I felt like that was one of the things that made that character work, in a sense, is that he was definitely not a hero. And this version, Ben Richards, yeah, it felt like he kind of was a hero and maybe just kind of misunderstood and kept down by society, but this is a good guy. He saves his coworkers. He's pro-union, like you said. He's not going out of his way to kill people. I thought it was very notable that he here early on when they almost capture him in the hotel, he's literally calling out to them, "Hey, this place is about to blow. Get out of here." It was very clear they were like, this isn't a killer. He's not someone who is doing X, Y, and Z, And I don't know that is the best decision for this character because I don't know. Again, that makes it broader, right? That makes it a little more like, well, we should like this guy. He's such a good guy.
While I have reservations about like King's version of this character, he is more unique and he is more complex, and like in this way you're kind of stripping something away from him to an extent.
Yeah.
But again, this is good messaging for a broader audience as well, as far as like, pro-union, pro-human, that sort of stuff.
I don't know, it's a little toothless though.
I think so. I agree. In seeing this too, like Stephen King's version of Ben Richards was like born an asshole and a kind of a piece of shit.
Yeah.
And this version of the character of Ben Richards seems like the system made him an asshole, and he's actually a good guy deep down. So like he's an asshole. He's like saying all this stuff about how he doesn't give a fuck about anybody but his family. But then his actions are one of like, he's just doing it out of reaction. His reaction is to do the right thing. And so
I'll give you an example. So there's one part where he meets up with the boy after the explosion, and in the book and in the movie, the same thing happens. He finds out that the boy has a sister who has cancer, and he gives them like extra money. When that happens in the book, it's a little bit more of like almost like we're seeing some growth out of the character because he's been so pessimistic and so borderline nihilistic. It's unclear whether or not he would ever care about anyone other than him and his own family. And for him to make that act in that moment was kind of like an interesting moment where it felt like he was starting to grow. Maybe his perspective was starting to shift a little bit.
Yeah.
Here, it just felt like so expected because this version of this character is such a good guy at his heart. I don't know, and just the way that scene plays, I think is an example of where that change can like affect our perception on it as an audience. Like I wasn't surprised at all when that happened in the movie. I don't know.
Sure. Another thing to get the full picture of this film, I think another thing we have to talk about, which is the area where I was having a major adjustment period, and that was like early on dialogue and early on and that was surprising to me in an Edgar Wright film because I feel like it's so sharp and I'm so like riveted by that usually, and like here it was like on, and again I think I have to assume that this is so intentional because like he's constantly delivering yippee-ki-yay motherfucker lines, like constantly.
Yeah,
the character is, and even early in the movie, he's like holding his baby, and he's like, you brought your kid in here to guilt trip me, and he's like, I brought her so that I didn't slam your face through this fucking table and stuff, and like,
yeah,
those things were just like, those are like kind of making me cringe a little bit, and that was like, it's so surprising to me, and as I went through, I was like, okay, there's no way that he didn't realize how batshit over the top crazy he's making this dialogue.
This is the writer of Hot Fuzz, so we know that he has to be aware of this.
He's so aware of it, and that's what I'm trying to get at. Like some of what I'm trying to get at here is like maybe this was a misfire because of like audience taste and what he was trying to do, but I think it was intentional. I think he was trying to make a broad action movie that's ridiculous.
Yeah. Well, maybe this is an example of broadness, unfortunately stretching things a bit too thin, and you get and it might be broad, but it gets a bit shallow.
I would be interested to hear his thoughts on this movie as time goes on, and like, to hear if
right now he's gonna be too close to it.
Yeah, he's very close to it, and at the end of the day, I think it is like there are just films that just don't show effort in some capacity, and shows that do that as well.
Yeah, no, and I didn't get that sense from this.
This is a film that doesn't show a lack of effort or a lack of care.
No, it's like it's got some misfires, but it wasn't due to them not caring or lack of effort. I agree that didn't seem to be the case.
This is where we get to New York, and he's going through and meets William H. Macy, and like he gets like some
meets Josh Brolin.
Some disguises. Yeah, meets Josh Brolin, who he's playing.
I like Josh Brolin in this movie. I thought he was pretty good as this executive asshole character.
I love Josh Brolin. Like, I'm a Josh Brolin fan.
Yeah, I think he's very good.
In this movie though, I almost was getting like him playing, and this is, you remember people's reaction to Mark Ruffalo in Mickey 17?
Oh,
and how like he's like playing like a corpo kind of guy.
Yeah.
I think Josh Brolin had fake teeth here, and like some of that was like coming through for me. And again, he plays a good asshole. Like he plays a good bad guy, obviously.
Yeah,
Brolin does. But that wasn't the role in the film that I was like blown away by.
Interesting. I think I was more positive on that one. Speaking of fake stuff, did Glenn Powell have like a fake vein on his forehead?
I think it was a scar. I think it was meant to be a scar.
Is that real, or is that something they added?
I think that's just a scar. Yeah, I think they like they added the scar.
They added it. I thought it looked like, you know how, like, because he said you may be the angriest man to ever enter the Running Man, and it's like when people get angry, they have that vein that pops out on their forehead. It looked like he had that like all the time, like it was just added to his face, and I thought maybe they were trying to make him look angry or something. I don't know.
Another comparison that I was thinking about for this movie, and this is again, it's not like really a great comparison, but the idea of a movie is, you ever see the movie Crank with Jason Statham? Yeah, that's like kind of what this movie's trying to do, or what the King Story was initially trying to do.
Yeah, but that movie's more insane.
More insane.
It's almost, this movie isn't insane enough to be that.
Yeah, but this movie plays in that space of just like, you know, again, let's move in. So this leads up to him leaving New York. So he's in disguise in New York, and he's getting away with it.
One moment I want to shout out from here early though is there was this moment where he goes into his hotel room, or whatever room it was he was staying in, and we get the commercial on TV, and it's actually the first time we see Coleman Domingo in this role, and he's doing an ad, and it's for Liquid Death, which is funny because it's like actually like a real product. So I wondered, I'm like, was this like sponsored by Liquid Death? And like, if so, like I still think this is funny. This is like a funny way to do it with this in-world ad.
They did it quite a few times, and again, I feel like that's Edgar Wright saying, "I'm doing what's happening in this world to you. I'm doing this to you." They did it with Monster. They did it with Liquid Death.
Monster.
They kept doing it and saying, "You want a monster?"
Yeah,
and like that's so tongue in cheek. That's so ridiculous. And so like I think that he's playing with everyone here to an extent, and I'm like, but like how far can you take it before you're like you're making a movie where people are like, ugh, it rubbed me the wrong way.
Yeah, it's like just because you're being self-aware about it doesn't necessarily make it okay. That one worked for me a little bit, but like, overall, I don't know if this isn't gonna always work. You can only do a few times, I think.
So he meets William H. Macy, and he gets like these disguises.
He's pretty good.
He's gonna,
this Molly character,
sure. Very small role, but I like him a lot as an actor. And then we get him being tortured for the information to find the hotel.
I don't know if that actually happened. So, like, this is one of the problems. There's a moment where he slams Josh Brolin's head into the desk, and then we also have this, which, like, seems to be a dream, which I think is actually a carryover from the book, because this was happening in the book. He had a dream about this happening, and it's one of the things that kind of made him paranoid, and then he ends up, like, sensing that they're coming for him. But here it was like they were at his door, about to kick it in, and then he wakes up, and that's not happening. And then, like, so then I'm like, did Molly get captured and tortured? Did that actually occur? I don't know. And like that's one of the things that I get frustrated with when movies start doing this a lot. We encountered this for something else. Oh, I know what it was. Night Bitch out of all movies, where like if you're showing these kind of like these fake sequences and then backing us up and going like, oh, actually that didn't happen. I don't know. It loses a little bit of credibility now, where I don't know what to believe. I don't know if I can believe what I'm seeing.
In this instance, he does say something down the line about like, you didn't get that information about from Molly about the bomb stuff. He's like, or something like that. At some point he said,
which is implying that it did happen.
I think it did happen.
But then I was like, but I thought it didn't happen. That's where that creates the confusion.
It was happening in like a dream. And that's also like part of like, I think he's playing with like a nightmare there, obviously, of like a nightmare of how they're going to find him as this possible like torture sequence. But ultimately they don't even need that. They have all these other, like that we learn later on that like they have all these other means of finding him. And they're kind of letting him go at some point. And this,
by the way, him having to record a tape and physically mail it in, I thought was a funny little holdover from the book. Because if you have any sense of like what, like this is a book written in like 73, came out in 82, and in so many ways it was prescient, but there's funny little things that just like didn't really translate to an actual future. And I thought it was interesting that he still had to mail in a physical tape here. I don't know, just a funny little holdover there, because like it seems like there would be so many other ways to upload or something, but like it does create a little bit of the dramatic tension of him needing to go out into public and deposit a thing. But again, that's because he's being so faithful to the plot. He wanted those same scenes.
Definitely. So this moves us into obviously like the New York stuff that happens, and this is I would say first big major like action sequence, and so we get him naked, like we put him in a towel, we get him like kind of flying out the window. What'd you think of all this sequence?
It was okay, man. I don't know. This is where I did kind of like, I guess his name's Evan McCone here. I think he was Tom McCone in the book. But so. This Evan McCone, he's wearing the mask, and the part where he's standing outside and he sees this happening and he just like claps. I was like, okay, I'm kind of into this. Like I don't know. I want these hunters to be kind of over the top and extra. But I was a little disappointed by all the rest of them, because there's 5 hunters, and like we get one other one that is even remotely memorable, and even he is not that memorable. And I was just a little surprised by that, you know? It's like really just about this one guy that is notable. So yeah, we have 5, but who cares about the other 4, basically? They could be anybody. They could just be goons.
It is definitely kind of how it went. And it's funny because like there is like a reveal that you teased earlier in the episode, and like I knew obviously the cast list and stuff, but like there's the person that is wearing the hood kind of thing, has such a unique body type and shape and movement and like mannerisms and stuff that like I'm like that's who he is. Like,
Did you know right away?
Yeah. Just
so I hadn't seen the cast list. I didn't know who was in this movie. I'd seen one trailer early on, and it was a long time ago, and I had honestly probably forgotten most of it. I didn't know. We're spoilers here, so I didn't know Lee Pace was in this movie. I will say when they were on the highway, and we got actually him talking a little bit back and forth with him, I'm like, that's Lee Pace right there. And then sure enough, when he revealed it, I was like, yes, I called it.
In terms of underrated actors, I think Lee Pace is due. Like, I think he's awesome. I think he's great. He's also a massive human being. And like I said, he's got a very interesting body shape, and like the way that he's moving around. And then for him to ultimately kind of be this like foil to our main character, like that
we'll get back to that. It's a change that I'm very interested in talking about.
But anyway, this is where he like kind of blows up the building, and then like
blows up the building. He kills some people, but again, there's a very clear attempt for him to not kill these innocent cops, you know.
Yeah. And then ultimately the network preys on that too, because like they bring their children in and they hold like a vigil in the middle of the TV
in the book
show.
A little bit to some extent, like some version of that happens in the book, yeah.
And then just the way that they're obviously like in similar, I think this is definitely similar to the original story too, just like twisting his words, like twisting what he's saying. And
that was something that we actually were kind of amazed by, how early on King had this like idea of like, he wasn't like really described in the same way as like a deep fake and stuff would be nowadays, or just even like AI. But yeah, I mean, like, you don't even have to hide it now. Like, I even like 2 or 3 years ago, I think people would have called bullshit on like how quickly and easily they were able to fake some of these videos. But that seems like it's doable now. That seems like it is doable today, which is crazy to say. And it's just scary. I fucking hate it. I mean, I saw someone say this recently, and I totally agree. AI has ruined pet videos for the internet. And, like, you don't need to know anything else about what made fucking AI terrible. The fact that you can't see a cute pet video anymore without having to wonder, at least for a moment, is this real or not? Because they've gotten so fucking good at making fake pet videos.
Yeah. I'm very into like underwater photography, and I watched a video the other day and was questioning whether it was AI the entire time.
I fucking hate it, dude. I hate that this is a thing. Every creative person from now until this fucking technology is abolished, which doesn't seem likely to happen,
they have to prove their
There's
work.
a specter of AI is going to hang over everything you do.
Right. Yep. And you kind of have to prove your work. We just had that photographer who did the shot of the jumper, like the very high sun, jumper, and he went across the sun and took the photo.
Crazy photo.
The only reason people didn't think that was AI is because they did the behind the scenes shoot, and they fully had to have another crew like shooting this, and like that's why people believed it.
You have to. And I will say, in the world of writing, it's almost impossible to do that.
You have to show yourself writing.
You can't, like, you can't. Like, there's just like, it's crazy.
Take a
like,
picture every day.
People, yeah. In like the bullshit about like, oh, M dashes are a sign of AI, and it's like, no, AI likes M dashes because writers like M dashes and have been using them forever. But like now people see that as a sign of writing being AI, and it's crazy.
So anyway, this video was like this person was filming a dolphin deep in the ocean, and then a school of dolphin came with like a humpback whale, and they were all traveling together towards the person filming. And then the fin of the whale gets very close to the person and almost touches them and stuff. And you're like, the whole time I'm like, this literally feels like a miracle. Like I don't know that this is real. Mm-hmm. And then in looking into it, like there was proof and there's a reason why it was real. But like some of the major things right now, which are not going to be long term, are the video was like really long, and the consistency of like the length of the video was like a giveaway, and like the consistency of like there's a few things that like are telltale signs right now, but when that goes away, it's all, you know, they'll be able to dub us on the podcast saying whatever they want.
Yeah. And maybe already can. Honestly, it's like the technology is growing and becoming more of a thing even faster than anyone I think thought. And yeah, I don't know where this goes other than somewhere dystopian, so pretty horrifying. But I guess back to the movie. The whole point was, I don't have any problem believing they can like instantly just have him saying something else, whatever they want, because they're going to be able to do that to all of us.
Yep.
Hooray!
Yep. So in Boston, the hunters track Ben to a hostel, and a firefight ensues, leading to an explosion that kills 8 network soldiers. Ben is sheltered by anti-network activist Bradley Throckmorton and his family, and attempts to expose the network's propaganda and deceit in his next recording. Instead, the network alters Ben's message with a foul-mouthed deepfake, and he is kicked out by Bradley's mother. Runner Jenny Laughlin is killed, leaving Ben as the sole remaining contestant, while his survival has earned the support of the poor and working class. Bradley sends Ben to Derry, Maine, to meet fellow activist Elton Perkis, who prepares to lead Ben to a bunker for the remainder of his run. Ben stops Elton's mother from alerting the authorities, but Elton does so anyway, dispatching them with booby traps to avenge his father. Ben and Elton flee in a buggy filled with explosives, but McConey kills Elton. Ben crashes the buggy into another hunter on a bridge and escapes into the river below. Traveling north, Ben discovers that a land development has paved over the bunker. Escaping surveillance drones, he commandeers a passing car and takes the wealthy driver, Amelia Williams, hostage. Amelia realizes the truth about the network's propaganda after seeing televised deepfakes of herself and agrees to help Ben.
Yeah, man. So we got to talk about some of these people he encounters here. This is right out of the book, by the way, the sort of helpful, African-American family here that takes him in and comforts him and helps him along the way. It was interesting that the mother believes the deep fake and then like kicks him out, when you would think that they would be on top of that. Like, I don't know why she believes it. It also kind of echoes what happens later with the other mother. So like kind of a strange moment where both mothers are the ones who turn on him.
I mean, it's like a real commentary, I think, as far as like who is going to be adaptable to the changes. And I think whoever's been around longer is going to find it.
The younger crowd, yeah.
It's going to take them longer to adapt to, and it seems like this is fast moving and all that, just like it is here. It's also like to drum up the chaos of this whole thing as well. Like, it's like there's no moment that anybody could have just slowed down and said, explain this one step at a time, and said, this is what's happening, this is why. But instead it's like, we got to keep the energy level way up here. So jump in the car. And then this is another set piece that we could talk about. He's like, okay, get into the trunk. He gets into the trunk, and then there's a sequence playing out while our character's in the trunk. And I think that that's honestly a really smart and clever, very fun way.
Yeah, I love that. I love the idea of like, we're stuck in here in the trunk with him. I kind of wish it had gone on a little longer. If anything, it ended kind of fast.
We don't know what's going on. He's getting bumped around. There's like funny dialogue happening, yet also like chaotic. There's bullets coming through the trunk.
Yeah, and we don't know what's going on too, because we're in there with him.
Yeah.
We're locked in the trunk with him.
That's an Edgar Wright scene. Like, that's Edgar Wright all over when I see that. And then he pops out into the middle of the scene, and it's just, boom,
it's just chaos is
it's
happening.
Just like, and I love like that. That's like, that felt like one of the moments of like the most Edgar Wright scene, the way that it's shot, the sequencing, the clever, like holding back the information so it's left to our imagination to wonder what's going on. How many people are shooting at them? Are they totally fucked? And then obviously the quippy dialogue from like the young brother and everything like that was funny.
So back it up just a hair. Back at the house, we get the first time we see this. I think he has them on tapes. It's unclear how he's showing them, but it's this like guy in a mask, and he's talking about the games and like what's actually going on, and it's kind of like a I don't know, almost like a pirate radio kind of thing, right? Like, well,
It's
this
definitely
is the real
akin
thing
to that,
going
yeah.
on, and I'm going to tell the truth, and this becomes an important thing that happens again later, right? Where we're getting some of the real story here. Yeah, I think this was all solid, and it really wasn't until we got to Maine where I have a bit of a problem. So, it wasn't that I loved the character in the book. I had plenty of problems with the character in the book. I just think the whole, like, let's cast Michael Cera against type and have him come in and actually be kind of a badass who kind of, you know, is way more capable than you think, because he looks like he's not gonna be, and it's just so self-aware. It's so, like, we're all aware that this is Michael Cera playing a character that he really doesn't fit. And, like, I think this has been done enough times now where I'm just tired of it. Like, it wasn't as charming for me as I think it wanted to be. And, like, I like Michael Cera fine. I have nothing against him. It just, like, felt like I've seen this from him before now. I've seen him come in and play a character that goes against type. As much as I wanted to have more fun with this, I was a little underwhelmed by it. And then, the whole thing where he calls the cops, I don't know, it was a bit much, man. Like, he didn't really seem to have much of a plan. He had the squirt gun, I guess, and, like, he had a couple things he did, but he didn't really deliver on this promise that he seemed to be making. By like literally calling the cops himself. That just seemed like a very dumb move. So, like, not only was, like, the kind of gag not really working for me, it's just the behavior of the character didn't really work for me. I don't know. This is kind of a miss for me, but maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm being a wet blanket over here.
I didn't mind the scene, and it didn't bounce off me in that way. I could see it. I think Michael Cera is a divisive. I think he's part of the reason why Scott Pilgrim versus the World was a little divisive when it came out, and people.
But he's playing the kind of dude he is in that. I don't know. Like this is the thing where they specifically cast him to play someone that's very against type.
I found it to be like slightly against type, but I didn't see him as capable as you're saying that he is. Like, I thought that, like, he was unhinged. Like, I thought that he was, like, he's. We get the backstory, right? Like, his dad was wrong, and it's funny because it kind of calls back to The Long Walk as far as, like, Ray Garrity's, like, his motivation there, and like, this is a character whose dad was a cop, and he was, like, not okay with the system, so he decided to leave it behind, and the other cops basically killed him at some point because they felt like he had too much information or he knew too much, whatever it was. They didn't agree with what he was doing, so they kill him. And his dad always stood by convictions of, like, you know, like, he's spreading real information through newspapers and stuff like that, and it seems like Michael Cera's character picks that up and runs with it.
I like the idea of this character. I just don't know.
Yeah. Well, what I'm saying is, like, he would have been very capable had he not done irrational things. Like, he was irrational in the way that he was, like, he got so wrapped up in his vengeance, where he, like, and he eventually hits the button and that's what I was gonna say. That's a great comparison because I was right there with you.
Yeah. If this had been Macaulay Culkin, now that would have been funny.
I didn't want to take credit. I didn't want to take credit. I saw someone online say that. I think that's really clever.
Yeah.
I
really?
like
They
the
did?
review.
Damn it!
Yeah,
I did not read that. But you should have cast Macaulay Culkin in this role.
And then it's like even more. But that's like a hat on a hat.
Yeah, I know. But then at that point, it goes back around to being amazing.
It's like three. It comes in threes. Once you get to, like, three, hat on a hat, then you're back around. Yeah. It didn't bounce off of it. I was, you know, I did have the moment of, like, oh, Michael Cera in an Edgar Wright film. This is fun to, like, come back around to. And I admit that, like, that's probably not everybody's reaction that they're gonna have. And then also, like, the way that he was talking about his, like, borderline deaf mother and, like, her being, like, a terrible person and how, like, he was navigating that. It was kind of funny. And then the Home Alone sequence, it was pretty. I don't know. I thought it was pretty fun. And it ultimately leads to him getting killed by the hunters. His rationale, by the way, is that he's got everything so pinpointed that he knows, like, how long it's going to take the hunters to get there after the cops are there. So he's just killing cops that supposedly killed his dad. Yeah. And then eventually moves on and like, they're going to get out of there before the hunters get there. It's terrible logic. It's never going to work. No. And so in that way, he's really not that capable. He just had Home Alone. Neither was Macaulay Culkin. And in Home Alone, he just had traps set up. He was much more, I would say, capable than our character here was.
God, Macaulay Culkin would have been perfect for this role. But yeah, I mean, like, they get down into the tunnel and there's that other hunter, right? It's like the only other, like, notable hunter who like stood out. He was like pretending he was like the crazy guy on the road, like standing out in the street, and that was who we had spotted earlier. And he's got kind of blonde, like, eyebrows or something, so kind of a distinctive looking. But yeah, we see Ben Richards not kill him here too. So there's Ben Richards, like, deliberately not killing people. and sort of sparing them. The only times he kills anybody is by accident, I think.
Last week, well, just if you haven't listened to our coverage, go back and listen to it from the book. But last week we talked about how there is like a revolutionary streak in our main character Ben Richards at the end of that story, this idea that like a revolution has been spurred on by him near the end, and we don't really necessarily feel that was that earned. I think you said it and I agreed. And like we see here like Edgar Wright maybe seeing that and saying like, I'm gonna seed in this revolution. And so Michael Cera's character here does serve also the purpose of like the motivation of the father, very Ray Garrity-ish, honestly, again from The Long Walk, where like this is a message and an ideology that's been moved from father to son and then on to the next person.
He has the literature made up that he's supposed to pass out after he wins or whatever, right.
And in general, he keeps telling him, like, be the spark or be the igniter or something like that.
Yeah, again, one's a little heavy-handed. Yeah.
No question about that.
Be the igniter or something. I forget what the word was that he used.
Yeah. And so, like, we build up this character who's then died and like, had this messaging. So, like, you're at least seeding the character now to have the revolution streak that happened at the end of the book. And then they changed that, so we'll talk about that next, like into the next area.
Yeah, but also, so in my friend I saw it with, we were talking about this right after. I felt like it was kind of uneven, even in that stuff too. Like we got a few more scenes. We get the scene of him going with the crutch to like watch people, watch the show, and it seemed like they were like very behind him. We see the Ben Richards Lives being like spray painted in different places, and we get the sense that there's like a rising kind of backing for him. But I don't know. I felt like the movie still didn't do like a great job of convincing me that would be the case, why that's the case, and then even when it did become the case, like why they would stick with him. Because later on, in the part we're probably about to get to next, he threatens to blow a bunch of them up.
Yeah.
And again, like we get to see the deep fakes where he seems to turn on them, and like it seems like the crowd believes it.
Yeah.
But then later on, it's as if they never believed it at all. And I'm like, well, you can't have it both ways. Either people are being fooled and they're believing it, or they're not. And I'm like, I don't know. It felt a little uneven too. And I agree. I think he was trying to address some of those concerns. I just don't know if it fully worked. I think there was an effort, but I still felt a little bit disconnected from the idea of this rising rebellion around Ben Richards.
I think the big turning points and the big pushes here are the person that we met in Bradley, that we met in like Boston, I think it was. So I think what we're led to believe is the way that the rebellion is building up is that there is a growing sentiment of distrust of the network. And what we're seeing here is like we're seeing like Bradley do these messages that are going out to seemingly the quote unquote poor people. Mm-hmm. And so I think they're realizing that the network is bullshitting them across the board. So even when they're doctoring and doing the deep fakes, they don't buy them. So they like when they see anything that they see that's coming from the network, they're distrustful of. And I think that that's building to what we get to here. Now, I disagree with how this ultimately came together in the end. And I still agree that like, while I know what his intention was, I don't think it necessarily landed squarely for me, but I do think that it's doing more in terms of like what I said at the end of last episode was I felt like at the end of the Stephen King story, there was more story to tell there and like more things to be threaded together that would sort of like get to the conclusion I think he was leading to, which is like sort of eventual realization or rebellion of some kind, because Stephen King's story does go there, but it feels like it takes a massive leap to get there, and I don't think that's the case here. For better or for worse, I think that like that's obviously seeded throughout, and I think it's a story worth telling, especially in today's day and age.
Small moment, but if I could offer one critique to Edgar Wright here, I think the first mother should have not believed the deep fake. Get some other reason to him need to leave there. But if she had said, no, the network deepfake stuff, and we like that it's known from people in like our caste system that like that's something we can't always trust what happens, that would seed for me the idea that the greater public wasn't just buying this, but with her believing it, and like I hadn't seen evidence of them rejecting stuff yet.
Well, we get like they're driving through lower income areas and they have all the Richard Lives and stuff. So they're buying into him because they're realizing that he's like against the system and they're not believing the system. The other notable thing is at some point, Bradley proves that the audience that we see at the Running Man is being manipulated. So like we're seeing people jeer. So we're thinking like, oh, they're buying it or they hate him or this or that. But that's they're literally showing the audience at home, an audience that's reacting to what's going on to tell them what to think.
Yeah.
Tell the
Studio
audience what to think. The studio audience is telling
role of the studio audience.
and so what's happening here is they're doctoring that. And so whatever we think the public sentiment is, that's a public sentiment from the network. And so in that way, we're not seeing what really the public is feeling. And then I think that also allows for me to like buy into more of like, oh, the public is actually like genuinely getting behind this guy versus the original.
If anything, I do think that this movie sells it a little better than the book does. I'll give you that. I just don't think it fully sold it.
Yeah. It doesn't land for me in a way that I'm like, this is such a class conscious thing that's now going to like really inspire our current like situation to feel different. But then again, maybe there are people who will see this and be changed by it. All right, so we talked about it a little bit, but there's like he takes the car and has Amelia there. They have the kind of back and forth between like the middle class and the like poor person who's being manipulated, and then eventually she's the one being manipulated, and then she buys that, and
her having to prove to herself that she's not the bad guy. That was interesting.
Like, are you of the middle class in the audience, are you willing to question
well, it's like the middle, even upper middle class again, like, and this is something I talk to people about sometimes. When this point gets made, it's like the 1% isn't even really the problem, it's the 1% of the 1% that's the problem. You know what I mean? It's like it's the billionaire class. And that is such a small number of people. I don't think people realize how few people
think that they're in the 1% when they make like $100,000 to $200,000 a year. You're not even close to the 1%.
But then again, even if you were in the 1%, the 1% is like not even near like their wealth by comparison to the people who are in the 1% of the 1% is astronomically different. It's the fucking Elon Musks out there that are the dragons sitting atop all this wealth. It's really that. But like anyway, but the idea of like of people across different classes really should come together and be like, actually, fuck those people. And that's hopefully what this story is at least getting across, because I thought that was definitely the main message here, and I thought pretty heavy-handed in his messaging, but still, it's a message I agree with, so I'll give it that.
For sure. Yeah, eat the rich, right? That's like, I think we're all familiar with that at this point, and like the film is playing in that space. And it's good messaging. Tax them, dude. Tax the fuck out of it. So reaching an airfield, they take off in a jet to Canada, guarded by McConey. Killian calls to offer Ben his own show as the network's newest hunter if he kills McConey and the remaining hunters, broadcasting footage of them murdering Sheila and Kathy to drum up support for Ben. Ben kills the hunters, posing as the flight crew, and McConey reveals himself as a former runner who took Killian's deal after nearly winning the first season. Killing McConey, Ben sends Amelia to safety with a parachute and Elton's revolutionary pamphlets. Killian gives Ben the chance to accept his new show on live TV, but Ben instead pleads for viewers to hunt down Killian and his fellow executives. The network redirects the jet to their headquarters, airing a deepfake of Ben threatening to crash into the building, and the plane is shot down. Sometime later, Amelia recovers the plane's black box and leaks the uncensored recordings, turning the public against the network. Ben, who survived due to the plane's auto-eject function, has become the face of the revolution and reunites with his family, whose deaths were faked by Killian. As the next season of The Running Man begins, host Bobby Thompson senses the audience's hostility and quits, leaving Killian to host the show. A riot breaks out and Ben emerges from the crowd and shoots Killian.
This all happens very fast at the end.
Yeah.
And like you reading it out there, I'm like, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, she airs this thing, it turns public opinion. This is a new season of The Running Man. Like, that all sounds good, but I would say like some of that in the moment, like it happened so fast that I hadn't even really like digested the one thing before the next thing was happening. And like, I don't know, that wasn't all clear to me that was occurring with exactly those beats. But again, I've only seen this movie once, so to be fair, maybe it's just something I missed. But like, that does a little more to sell it too, because the whole thing is like, they would need to see the uncensored events on that plane. And I guess the implication is that they did. So, I guess like maybe there could have been some sort of implication of the distribution of this, because it's like, it's the tape we're watching, I guess, is the idea that was the tape that people are seeing. And like, is this something that people are watching? I guess I didn't know, but not just like a select group of people, but actually like a general public are able to see this. that helps a little bit, I think. But let's back up and talk a little bit about the whole sequence, because this is one of the biggest diverges, where it diverges the most. There are things I really liked about this. There's other things that I don't know, I'm a little more mixed on. But one of the things is this whole McCone. I'm going to call him McCone. You've been saying McConey. I don't remember how it's pronounced. But his whole his reveal, and then the further reveal that he is a former winner or near winner of The Running Man from season 1 that we've heard about, somebody making it all the way to the 29th day or whatever. I thought this was a really cool addition. I think this is smart. I think the idea of showing him as being like an embittered guy who like took the deal and has become the lead hunter, and like I don't know, this worked for me. It's almost like Dark Hamish, right? From the Hunger Games, right? Instead of being a mentor, he becomes the literal villain.
There's a few things that I really appreciated about this. In the original story, I think he really only made it like he hit the threshold of 8 days and then like just went over it. So I think he only made it like 10, 12 days maximum, maybe just 8 or 9.
I don't remember. I can't tell you.
And here they say like McConey made it 29 days. So he was about to win the whole thing. And then he takes the deal because it's too good to turn down. And then he talks about how like, yeah, of course, you take the deal and then you try to do good, right? You would try to resist the network and all this other stuff. But then it sounds like they leveraged his family constantly against him, and they turned him into this monster, probably seemingly killing them at some point. And now he is who he is. And he's this like he's this dark version.
Yeah, I think he even says that they were like tortured in front of him.
And so like that's the fate of our main character if he takes it.
And this is one of the things where like the story, I mean, there's only because this was added, but like there is like a heart to the story that's incredibly, incredibly dark. That at times tonally it feels a little weird with some of the like unwillingness this movie had to go there. Sometimes it felt like kind of stepping back. I don't know. It's a weird tonal thing that
we talked about how like Stephen King talked about how like he takes a blow, Richards takes a blow, and his intestines are like hanging out, and for a second he does take that blow near the abdomen.
I was like, oh shit, are we doing it?
Are we gonna get like all of his?
Is he gonna be dangling on the ground? Is he gonna be tripping over him and stuff? Yeah.
But that was our first sign that there was gonna be a major change here. That like in terms of it being like sort of a nihilistic story, look at like authoritarian, like a fighting authoritarian regime is like you might not make it through, but like you might be doing it for the greater good. And so like there's this like faked death here, and like how that fundamentally changes the story. Like his family's still alive and he's still alive at the end of the story.
So it's so
like,
funny because like last week I literally had this question. You remember? I was like, why would he believe him about the family? Yes, he says like a compelling reason for like why. He's like, oh, you think we wouldn't have killed them, we would have done X, Y, and Z. Okay. That sounds good, but you could still be lying to me because there might be another angle I'm not seeing. And that was why I was like, I don't think you believe him in this moment. And I like that Edgar Wright, I think, identified that as well and decided to play into that. And like, it actually is a lie in the movie and that the family's not dead. Whereas I guess in the book, the implication is that they were. We never really have confirmation one way or the other. So that was an interesting little change. I like that for the most part. I do think there's, I don't know, you get a little bit of the like showing us a fake scene and then pulling it away and going out that it didn't actually happen. A little bit of kind of like a manipulation, but at this point at least, it's not the film that's manipulating us, it's a character manipulating everybody within the film, and like I'm a little more on board with that than like the film manipulating me in the same way. It's a little bit of both, but I would say, not fully. And then like the showdown, having the other hunters be the flight crew get killed was cool.
How'd you feel about that sequence? Like
I thought that was a fun action sequence, like you said, the 0G stuff.
If it's Edgar Wright, they're really doing that, right? And the way that, again, like I think just the sequencing, you just know that like it's storyboarded. He's thought of each individual, how like, one guy turning the gun is going to shoot this and it's going to impact that. And like the way that like at some points, like even the network is taking control of the plane and like making, because at some point, that's the other big kind of change. Like there was maybe an implication of it in the original story, but they are literally at some point, Ben Richards is like, I'm kind of invincible until you guys want me to die. Yeah. So you guys are going to like I'm not going to mail things out anymore. You're just going to like give me my money if you want me to play the game. So they continue to agree to that. And then nearing the end, like they want things to be done on air. So they're like, they'll like readjust the remote plane to.
Yeah. That was it was a little convenient at times when it was like, oh, we're on a commercial break right now, so we can't kill you. It's like, okay.
But still playing with like that's what they're playing at. Like that's their main focus and goal is like they want to make sure that it's for the content and for this and that, and that's a commentary of what our real world can be like in some places, like doing stuff for the content. And seeing like those sequences anyway. I like to see Edgar Wright, like even in $100 million big blockbuster where it's been kind of broadened, I can still see like his expertise at work in an action sequence like that. And yeah.
So I think let's talk about the big changes though to the end. So in the book, basically the thing that they're like trying to kind of show him wanting to do, in the idea that he's wanting to fly the plane into the building and kill everybody in the studio audience, I guess is the implication. But like, that is basically what he does in the book. But he's just trying to kill Killian, and he does, and that's how the book ends. He, spoiler for the book, I guess, he kills Killian in that manner, and he's taken a mortal wound at that point. So it is kind of like this last act of defiance, and you could say that there is an implication that maybe this would ignite something, and I think they just kind of leaned into that. This maybe does kick off some rebellion, but it's not something that Ben Richards is a part of. In a very big difference here, we get the reveal that he survives the plane getting blown up. It seems like he was a part of this like a detached cabin thing that was able to get away and like have a parachute. And because of that, he lives, and then he like personally executes Ben Killian on this moment at the start of the new season of The Running Man, where Ben Killian tries to like take over the show himself, and then so all this happens very rapidly at the end. It's a very big change from the book. What were your thoughts on this change? Did it work for you?
Yeah, so even like I thought that the emotional through line of the story was being built up, and this idea that he's a good guy and all this other stuff, and I thought the sacrifice play would still be made. Mm-hmm. And I think in that way, that emotional gut punch of like their sacrifices need to be made. Let's not even say sacrifices, but hard things and hard times and like hardship will come. Things are going to get harder before they get better, sort of situation with like the messaging, and like that can be the case, or it's like at least expect that so that like you're prepared for this sort of thing. And instead we get this like really neat ending where he survives conveniently. His family's still alive. Yep. He leads the rebellion in a very Katniss Everdeen sort of way. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, this is really neat for what I was expecting here, and like kind of a film that like was at least bombastic and was like really enraged and mad and stuff. And I think like that ending sort of fits that level of like intensity. And then to pull this back, it does feel like a broadening, which we've just continued to talk about in this story. And like I do kind of there's a part of me that's like, oh, it's fun and it's happy to see happy endings like this, but also like it would have hit hard. I think audiences would have been like, oh fuck, if he dies, and even if his family's still alive, you can have his family still be alive. That feels nice, but he dies for the rebellion.
Have Amelia come to the family, something like that, rather than him.
I would have appreciated it.
I agree. It's like, I don't know, I don't hate it, but like it seems like it just has a little bit less teeth to it, and it's clever. There was a lot to like here at the end, but overall maybe slightly less effective.
Oh, and I also definitely understand in a post 9/11 world not running a plane into a building.
That's true.
Like that, I'm not saying that he needed to do that. Like, but in some way, like doing some sort of big play to take out the villains.
I was kind of surprised that this whole thing ended on the plane still. Like again, that was like one of those things where like surprisingly faithful in a lot of ways. All right, man. So I think we've obviously been pretty divided over this movie. So here at the end, I think let's talk book versus movie, but then also maybe bring in The Long Walk and how we feel this compares to that. Now, let's try and do it without spoiling anything about The Long Walk in case people haven't seen or watched that, but just kind of broadly speaking. You want to start things out?
Sure, yeah. I will talk first about this movie in comparison to the original source.
Yeah.
There are things that I do not like about this film. There are things that I really like about this film. I overall enjoyed myself watching this film. I don't know that I'm going to go for repeat viewing very soon. Maybe somewhere down the line I will. It's Edgar Wright I'd like to revisit maybe. But like, it's not in the pantheon of my favorite Edgar Wright films. It's not a movie that I'm like running out and telling everybody to watch immediately. With all that said, that Stephen King story wasn't even close to my favorite Stephen King story either. And I said that last week. So it's not like a high bar in either case almost. Mm-hmm. And so for my sensibilities and for like the purposes of like maybe tightening some of the revolution narrative, and maybe just because like the action sequences played out differently, which you commented on about like the action of Stephen King's story wasn't as engaging as it maybe felt like it could have been. This is like tightening some things while also having other areas that are messy and don't work really. So like I'm taking the movie in this case, but not necessarily saying like that's a huge accomplishment in a sense.
Let's hold the maybe the long walk stuff, and I'll weigh in on that for me. I'm with you on all of that, man. It's like this book was not that high a bar to like surpass. Like I thought it was just kind of okay. So this is one where I really thought this was going to be an easy movie was better situation. But I think, I mean, I'm with you up to the point of where I think I'm going to go with the book, but it's only because it was like the original. I think there's a little more consistency and clarity of tone and voice to what King was doing. Ben Richards, I think, played better as this almost more nihilistic guy. I didn't necessarily like him that much, but like just as far as like narrative coherency, it didn't have any of that. I don't know. There's a little bit of pandering stuff going on. It didn't feel like it was doing that as much. So I'm just going to give it slightly to the book, even though, again, it's not a book that I'm necessarily recommending for people. If you're looking for, getting started with Stephen King, this is going to be pretty far down my list of like books I would point you to. But yeah, I guess I'll give it slightly to the book, but they're pretty close, honestly, and both just being kind of okay.
All right, so we're mixed, and that makes sense.
Yeah, but what about the long walk? Yeah. How do you feel about the long walk? And both, if you want, you can kind of divide it up, book and movie. How do you feel about those compared to what we just went through?
I think I'm going to take the long walk in both cases, but I have a few things that I would say about it. So the long walk, I think it was emotionally fulfilling, and I think it had a lot of good messaging to it. I don't think that I was having as much fun watching it. I don't think that I was having like it was more so just like it was intense. It had a lot to do with like, brotherhood, and then like this commentary on possible like Vietnam and the relationships between these young men, and then like seeing the finality of losing people along the way and all that kind of thing. I may have enjoyed watching, I don't know, it's such a bad metric, but it's like I almost feel like I kind of enjoyed watching The Running Man more, but the Long Walk was a way better film, especially if we're just talking purely performance based. Like the two leads in The Long Walk were far and away better than any performances in this film, but like this film was better shot. There's like interesting sequencing and I think that it's got a lot of like substance and style to it as far from a filmmaking perspective, but not necessarily from like an overall narrative, like, I don't know, satisfying perspective. But I'm taking The Long Walk in both cases. Also, just for the book portion, I just mentioned last week, like with The Running Man, Stephen King's, like the Richard Bachman original story, I felt like there was more to be said. And like there was like the revolution was being talked about and stuff, but it wasn't like really talked about. And at least in The Long Walk, no spoilers, but like in The Long Walk, it's sort of look at some of that is removed by way of the form and like the format of the story, because it's so close to The Long Walk. Like some of that commentary is kept.
Yeah. Like it's understandable that you don't get all that. Yeah, man, I'm with you. I think The Long Walk is a book that is definitely better. I think it is actually quite high on my list of King novels, if I were to say, or if I were to try and put it out there. I don't know where it falls, but it's pretty high up there, man. I think this is actually a very good novel from him, especially super early in his career, maybe the first book he wrote. I think the adaptation was also quite good, and I think it is probably the better film here. I will grant you, very different tone. It is much more depressing story. It's a harder watch. But for me, I enjoyed it more because I tend to enjoy depressing, upsetting things when they're well done, and I think it was very well done. So I got the enjoyment of that well execution, I think, and I'm gonna give it to The Long Walk. If you're gonna watch a Bachman adaptation that came out this year, go Long Walk. If you're gonna read a Bachman book that was adapted this year, go Long Walk.
What a year for Stephen King, specifically Richard Bachman. But like we usually cover a few Stephen King projects, but we did The Monkey. We did The Long Walk, and we did The Running Man, and those two were like kind of back to back. And then there was another adaptation.
It'll be interesting at the end of the year to go through all of that for sure. Our last looks episode, which will be coming in not that long away.
Maybe less than a month. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess that's where we're gonna leave it. It sounds like both of us are divided on this movie, and in true form, you're divided. You're gonna take the movie, I'll take the book here, but either of us are not crowning this as like some incredible achievement. If you enjoyed our coverage, let us know in the form of a rating and review on whatever app you chose to listen on. If you're listening on an audio, if you're on YouTube, make sure to subscribe to our channel, like the video. And I'm totally fine. This is one where like I would love to hear other opinions. If people really love this thing, I'd love to hear about it. If you really fucking hated it, I'm curious to hear that too. Like, I feel like that's valid. There's a lot here to hate. There's a lot here that you could like. So I'm definitely curious to hear. So let us know in the comments, like, what you thought of this thing.
We've said it. Like, I'm a Edgar Wright fan. Like, I've got my Last Night in Soho soundtrack vinyl right here. Like, this is the score of the film. Like, I like his stuff, and like I hope that it didn't come off as if like we
are haters.
Yeah, I hope it didn't come off that we're haters, because that's not. And we don't like to dislike things, but this movie was,
if anything, we should be accused of being more positive.
I think we would be, honestly. I think if we're not critics, and I think critics would look at us and be like, "You guys are soft. Why are you be harsher?" And like we're creatives.
It's because I think we're very sympathetic to the creators.
Yeah, we're creatives. We work in that space. Like, I can imagine how many variables go into making a film, and like Edgar Wright making $100 million blockbuster. Like, this is like he gave it. You can't say he didn't give it effort, and I think that that's always a like something to be applauded. So anyway, if you would like to connect with us on social media, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Blue Sky, TikTok, all of those at Ink to Film, and you can find us on pretty much every social media platform.
That's right. And if you'd like to support this podcast in another way, we do have a Patreon. It's patreon.com/Ink2Film. By the time this comes out, the poll on the quarterly project will be done. So we don't yet know what our next project is, but it will have been decided by the time this comes out. But if you want to in the future be able to vote on like what you want us to cover, that's the place to do it. We also have bonus episodes on there, and notably, by the time this comes out, once again, I would expect the Running Man movie episode to at least be out or out soon. So if you want to check that out, it's going to be patreon.com/Ink2Film.
Thank you, Ross Bugden, for use of our intro and outro music.
All right, that's it for The Running Man. We're rapidly approaching the end of the year. It's crazy. All right, until next time.
Keep adapting.